Several years ago, a gospel song was written, and one of the verses went like this: "Excuses, excuses, you hear them every day. Now the devil will supply them if from church you'll stay away. When people come to know the Lord, the devil always loses, so to keep those folks away from church, he offers them excuses." Charles Swindoll, several years ago, in one of his books, talked about excuses, and he called them a lie wrapped in the skin of a reason. Well, that wasn't original with him. Billy Sunday, almost 100 years ago, said almost the same thing. He said the skin of a reason, an excuse is the skin of a reason stuffed with a lie. Have you ever heard this term applied to excuses? Lame, feeble. Well, in Luke chapter 14, Jesus talks about commitment. He starts out in the chapter with a meal. He's going to eat with someone. And so he's invited. He's the guest of honor. And so Luke chapter 14, verse 1 says, "Now it happened as he, Jesus, went into the house of one of the rulers of the Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath, that they watched him closely." Have you ever been to fancy dinners, or maybe someone has invited you to their house that you don't know well, but it's more than just a meal? You're kind of nervous. You feel like people are watching you. You know, don't do things at their house that you normally do at your table, in your house. Eating and meal etiquette. You know, you take the napkin and do this. You don't take your sleeve and go, things like that. Or if you have your grandkids with you at home, you laugh at that, but out at a restaurant, a fine restaurant, that kind of embarrasses you. It doesn't embarrass me. I think it's kind of funny. And but anyway, so they're watching Jesus, and Jesus knows what's going on. And the long story short is, it's the Sabbath, and he heals somebody. They got a problem with that. So in verse 7, Jesus tells a parable to those who are invited. He noted how they chose the best places, saying to them, "For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." So Jesus is talking about your position. And don't think more highly of yourself than you ought. Don't set yourself up on a pedestal. And so in verse 15, Jesus tells another story, another parable. He says to those who are sitting at the table with him, and someone said, "Blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God." Probably, you know, sometimes people say things, they try to impress those who are around them. A lot of times they end up putting their foot in their mouth with what they say. And Jesus turns around and he says to the whole group, beginning in verse 16 of Luke chapter 14, "A certain man gave a great supper and invited many. And then he sent his servants at supper time to say to those who were invited, 'Come, for all things are now ready.' The invitation went out. We're going to come. We're going to eat. Sends his servants out. Say, 'Okay, it's time to eat. Everything's ready.' Tell them to come on." You come in the house. What's for supper? This, that, and the other thing. I'm hungry. So you go and start watching Gunsmoke, Rifleman, Andy Griffith. And then the cook of the house says, "All right, it's time to eat." And you sit there and continue to watch your TV. My mother used to say, "This isn't a cafeteria. Eat what's put in front of you, or you go hungry." And Jesus said, guy has a meal. He lets people know the day. He sends his servants out. it's time to come and eat. And out of respect for the host, they should know that it's coming. So they shouldn't get involved in some lengthy project. And whatever they're doing, they need to be able to put it down and go in a timely manner, be at the host's house to eat. But such is not the case here. The Bible says in verse 18, but they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, I bought a piece of ground and I have to go see it. I ask you to have me excused. Another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm going to go to test them. I ask you to have me excused. Verse 20, still another said, I've married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. Now look at verse 21. So the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house, being angry, said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city and bring in the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and there's still room. Master said to the servant, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper. May the Lord bless this reading of his word to our hearts. Excuses. As Swindoll said, a lie wrapped in the skin of a reason. An excuse is always lame. There are good reasons for some things. So I want us to quickly look at what Jesus had to say here about these excuses in this parable. And the first one in verses 15 through 18, the guy says, I bought a piece of property and I need to go check it out. What he's saying is my current possessions are my priority. My physical possessions are my priority. My stuff. My stuff. In other words, my goods are my priority. God is not the priority. Goods are. They're personal goods. All right. Sight unseen. I have heard recently, with the way things are in the housing market, that there are people who will submit a bid to buy a house and have only seen pictures of it, never even set foot on the property, and they submit a bid above the asking price. And sometimes they get outbid, even though they quickly submit a bid as soon as it goes on the market, sight unseen, above the asking price, and it's still, okay? Now that's not normal. I'm going to tell you right now, I am not going to buy a house that I haven't gone in, crawled under, looked around from stem to stern, from underneath it to the top. But this guy said, oh, I can't come. I bought a piece of property, now I need to go see if it's worth what I paid for it. He had no intention of going. Now, before I go any further, I need to clarify something, okay? We got this thing y'all gave us, remember? The Ninja Foodie. Yeah, you can cook stuff pretty quick. Microwave, you can cook stuff pretty quick. Well, back in that day, you didn't have a refrigerator. If you're going to have a meal, you killed the animal that morning. You got the vegetables that morning at the market, and then you cooked it old school, and it took a while. So the host would say, come to my house this Saturday for supper. You know that sometime after lunch, you're going to eat. You know it's going to be Saturday. You just don't know what time. And so the host is asking for a commitment. You go, oh, yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there. And so when the food was ready, you knew that somebody was going to come around, didn't have a phone, couldn't text you, couldn't email you, couldn't tweet you. They had to come by and physically, yo, it's time to eat, come on. And everybody headed over there to eat. Well, this guy says, oh, I can't come. Knew all along he wasn't going to come. This was a lame excuse. He knew Friday night he had a commitment. He could have gone and looked at that property any one of the other days. We spend far too much time, far too much wasted energy and effort on people who don't want to be here. Because guess what? They're going to continually say, yeah, I'm going to come, just like these guys. If you go out there tomorrow and witness, oh yeah, I'll be there Sunday. Okay, they got 6 days to come up with every lame excuse in the book not to be here. Challenge them to Christ, say, how would you like to know how to go to heaven from here? Because guess what? You can't stay here. You die if you don't go to heaven. There ain't but one place to go. You can't stay here. What are you going to do? Where are you headed? What's your excuse? Because we're all going to stand before God, and them excuses aren't going to hold weight. They're not going to hold water. This guy, oh, I got some property. I need to go look at it. I bought it. Well, secondly, in verse 19, you got a guy who said, well, I got a team of oxen. I need to go try them out. Again, even more so. I might consider buying a house sight unseen if somebody has inspected it and sends me a certified inspection sheet and a structural engineer's gone under the house and says, all good. I might consider it, but I'm going to tell you what, that ain't no way I'm going to go buy a car that I haven't crawled over, under, and around and driven and looked at under a microscope with a fine-tooth comb. Okay? That's what this guy said. Literally, I'm going to go buy, my livelihood is farming, and I'm going to go look at this try this tractor out I just bought that I haven't. That doesn't make sense either. Again, this guy told the host, yeah, I'll be there, with no intent of ever showing up. And comes up with this feeble excuse of, oh, I just bought a team of oxen and I got to go try them out. Vance Havner said this, former pastor of First Baptist Charleston. Men do not feel their need for God nowadays because they look to the labor union for their retirement benefits, to the government for hospital care and other things, to wonder drugs for their ailments, to tranquilizers for their comfort. A pill averts consequences of immorality. Man is now his own judge of what is right and wrong. He has just about given God his walking papers. Solomon said this in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 17 and 18. Therefore I hated life. This is the wisest guy in the world, although sometimes I wonder. Therefore I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing me, for all his vanity and grasping for the wind. Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to a man who will come after me. You can't take it with you. Somebody else is going to have your stuff after you're gone, and you can't stay here. You got to go. One place or the other. This guy, his current lifestyle is his priority. The first one, his property was, his goods. This guy, his goals. I have goals. God can't get in the way of my goals. I got things I got to accomplish and do, and God, I ain't got time for that. Whenever I accomplish my goals and get my stuff done, then I might consider you. Well, it doesn't work that way. And then finally, the guy in verses 19 and on, my current family's a priority. He says, oh, I have taken a wife, married a wife, so now I can't come. So what you're telling me is you married an unbeliever. right? You said you were going to come to the banquet. Oh, I can't come. I got a wife. Well, your wife doesn't eat? I can't come to church. I got married. Well, you married an unbeliever? Let me camp on this for a minute, and then we're going to close. Verse 21, the guy gets angry, and he sends his servant out and says, go out there and drag in anybody who'll come. I did, and nobody can come. No, we still got room. We'll go out there and compel everybody to come. To reject God's invitation is to offend him. He'll get upset. You want to get God upset? Come up with a bunch of lame excuses. Moses found that out. In Exodus chapter 3 and 4, Moses is on the backside of the desert. He's got a father-in-law named Jethro, and he's about 80 years old. God has a plan for him. The burning bush, you know, the bush is on fire and speaks to him and doesn't get consumed. And we see here for the first time God using his name, Yahweh, the great I am that I am, tells Moses, this is hallowed ground that you're on. God's business is hallowed business. We should not take it lightly. We need to take it seriously. It needs to be our number one priority. Not our goods, not our goals, and not some gal or guy that we, quote, are in love with. God says, I'll be there with you. Long story short, in Exodus 3 and 4, Moses comes up with all these excuses. Oh, Pharaoh ain't going to listen to me. You tell him I am that I am sent you. Oh, but I just don't know if I can do that. Go pick that stick up. It turns into a snake, and he throws it away, and God says, go grab it by the tail, and turns it back into a stick. That is your rod. That is the rod of God, and you can do all kinds of things with that. Trust me. Oh, but, you know, I don't know what to say, and I'm not, you know, an eloquent speaker. Maybe he stuttered, and God kind of gets upset. In verse 11 of Exodus 4, God, after he says, Moses goes, I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. All right, so far, 3 excuses. And God said, who made man's mouth? Who makes the dumb or deaf or seeing or blind? Have not I the Lord? So go, and I'll be your mouth. Verse 14 said, and the anger of the Lord was kindled, burned against Moses. You want to get God mad? Go ahead and keep making excuses. I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't come. You saw the video, the unqualified, that erases that excuse. Oh, I'm not qualified. Well, that's gone. I will speak through you and through your brother. So take your brother Aaron with you. So every time Moses comes up with an excuse, God just erases it. So just don't make the excuse. Just say, all right, God, I know I can't do this, but I know you're going to help me. You help Moses, you'll help me. So here's where a lot of problems lie. In 2 Sundays, it's going to be Father's Day. The father needs to be head of the house. He needs to be the spiritual head of his home. That means Dad says, we're going to church. And when everybody starts making excuses, he goes, you got 2 choices. Either go to church or something very undesirable and possibly painful that you don't like. And so you're going to go to church. Real quickly, 2 Corinthians 6:14 talks about being unequally yoked. Okay? Unequally yoked. Paul says, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. So what does an unbeliever have in common with you? Let me ask you this. You say you're a Christian, you say you're born again, you say that you're following Christ, but yet you date someone who is not a Christian, doesn't have anything spiritually in common. What in the world are you doing? What are you doing? because you're going to make a commitment to spend the rest of your life with this person who spiritually is headed in a totally opposite direction than you are. Then you're going to have kids. What direction are they going to go? Hello? You don't marry an unbeliever. The way to avoid that is you don't date an unbeliever. You hang around with people who believe like you. That's the Barnabas thing. Now, I'm not saying you don't have anything to do with lost people, because you need to be saved, but you don't marry someone who's not a believer. And you, Dad, need to be the more spiritual one. You are the one charged with the spiritual direction of your family and your children.